Okay, let's go. Middle of 50.
Yeah.
10-4. Middle of 50 in the 12 and 12 in step 4, but we're talking about step 6. All the readings that we're doing in the step 4 and the 12 and 12 are to highlight aspects of the defective character that we're trying to relinquish in step 6. We've read a good 2/3 of the chapter. We're hoping to finish it off tonight and get into the beginning of step 6 again. So that's our goal. But before we start, we always pray. Creator, thank you. Thank you for this beautiful day and this beautiful weekend. Bringing family together and giving us time to relax and connect and kind of focus on you, God, and just grounding ourselves in our relationship with you. Creator, I thank you for my life today and the experiences that you've given me to allow me to grow and to learn. And I'm really grateful for the seemingly negative challenges that you present to me that I often have to get counsel on and learn how to navigate in a loving way. Sometimes my fear and my resentment and pride get in the way, and I know that those are all challenges, Creator, for me to grow and learn. And I appreciate you for giving me the willingness and honesty and open-mindedness to do that. Creator, I thank you for the pillars and the friends that I have in this world that hold me to task and sometimes care more about my life than my feelings. Creator, I ask for your guidance for all of us today as we come into this study with an open mind and open heart, that we're able to learn something new and find a new experience in ourselves and you, the AA program or whatever program we're in, and try to grow and learn in a good way and carry this message of love to your fellow kids in our families and in society. Creator, I thank you for my life today, and please watch over us. Hi.
God, thank you for the day, for the weekend, for the weather. It's starting to get people outside and me up earlier. Thank you for my children, for the conversations that we've been able to have over the weekend, and for the ways that, especially my middle son, I pray for him for just the courage to keep showing up and being a teenager and being honest about where he's at and looking for ways to win the level, so to speak. Thank you for the week I had with Maze, getting through it with my arm. Thank you for answering prayers and making sure that people were around me when I felt like jumping off the faith ship. That patience really is something that requires a lot of faith. And putting the people around me shows me over and over and over again that we don't do this alone. And that I couldn't do this by myself, because over and over and over, I would jump off the faith ship. Thank you for everyone here tonight, and God bless everyone that isn't here tonight, that is on the road to recovery in whatever stage they're at. Amen.
Hi. Awesome. So anyway, just quickly before we start, so we're on step 6, right? Humbly asking God to remove these defects of character. And the thing about step 6 is it's all about turning to God, right? It's all about going to God. So what we're doing here in the 4 is we're just bringing to the surface the things that we need to be aware of. And by no means is this step 4 reading like a full comprehensive aspect of all of the defects that we struggle with. It's actually just a snippet. But I remember when I first started being interested in the defective character around 2 years sober, a year and a half sober, when they were really fucking up my life, I knew that the answer was in the step work in these books. So I went into the 6 and I started reading the 6, and there's aspects of it that we'll kind of point out tonight. And it really expanded my mind on what I needed to watch out for. And then as I read into the 4 with my buddy Jesse, it really expanded my viewpoint on the more subtler defects of character that I didn't really see. But over the years, I've really learned that both 6 and 4 in this literature are just little snapshots of kind of what we're looking for. As these defects, as time goes on, they get more cunning and baffling, and they are powerful. And the cunning, baffling, powerful nature of this disease is it's not the substance that's cunning, baffling, and powerful. You know, and how it works, we always read that, and that's what it says, but that's not the truth. The truth is the defect of character that represents the instincts gone astray is the primary cause of our destructive drinking and failure at life. So the cunning, baffling, and powerful part of the disease is within the defects. The powerful part of the cunningness and of this is powerfully, blindly, many times subtly, these things drive us, dominate us, insist upon ruling our lives, and they often tyrannize us. Essentially, the instincts are the powerful part of these defective characters that we need to eventually kind of dig down into the root of the problem, because these defects that we're finding, they're just the branches. And when we first start the program, you can see the branches, and to some degree, it's easy to relinquish some of these things and change, maybe resist. But if we keep resisting, we don't learn the lesson. So it's over time that these things get dealt with in the subconscious, i.e. third column of your resentments, or, you know, third column of whatever inventories we're doing. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that before we keep going here. Okay.
You read?
Sure.
Since step 4 is but a beginning, so I'm halfway down page 50. Since step 4 is but a beginning of a lifetime practice, it can be suggested that he first have a look at those personal flaws which are acutely troublesome and fairly obvious. Using his best judgment of what has been right and what has been wrong, he might make a rough survey of his conduct with respect to his primary instincts for sex, security, and society. Looking back over his life, he can readily get underway by consideration of questions such as these. When and how, and in just what instances did my selfish pursuit of the sex relation damage other people and me? What people were hurt and how badly? Did I spoil my marriage and injure my children? Did I jeopardize my standing in the community? Just how did I react to these situations at the time? Did I burn with guilt that nothing could extinguish, or did I insist that I was pursued and not the pursuer, and thus absolve myself? How have I reacted to frustration in sexual matters? When denied, did I become vengeful and depressed? Did I take it out on other people? If there was rejection or coldness at home, did I use this as a reason for promiscuity? Also of importance for most alcoholics are the question that they must ask their behavior respecting financial and emotional security. In these areas, fear, greed, possessiveness, and pride have too often done their worst. Surveying his business or employment record, almost any alcoholic can ask questions like these. In addition to my drinking problem, what character defects contributed to my financial instability? Did fear and inferiority about my fitness for my job destroy my confidence and fill me with conflict? Did I try to cover up those feelings of inadequacy by bluffing, cheating, lying, or evading responsibility? Or by gripping that others failed to recognize my truly exceptional abilities? Or did I overvalue myself and play the big shot? Did I have such an undisciplined ambition that I double-crossed and undercut my associates? Was I extravagant? Did I recklessly borrow money, caring little whether it was repaid or not? Was I a pinch penny, refusing to support my family properly? Did I cut corners financially? What about the quick money deals, the stock market, and the races? Businesswomen in AA will naturally find that many of these questions apply to them too, but the alcoholic housewife can make the family financially insecure. She can juggle charge accounts, manipulate the food budget, spend her afternoons gambling, and run her husband into debt by irresponsibility, waste, and extravagance. But all alcoholics who have drunk themselves out of jobs, families, and friends will need to cross-examine them ruthlessly to determine how their own personality defects have thus demolished their security. The most common symptoms of emotional insecurity are worry, anger, self-pity, and depression. These stem from causes which sometimes can seem within us and other times seem to come from without. To take inventory in this respect, we ought to consider carefully all personal relationships which brings continuous or reoccurring trouble. It should be remembered that this kind of insecurity may arise in any area where the instincts are threatened. Questioning directed to this end might run like this. Looking at both past and present, what sex situations have caused me anxiety, bitterness, frustration, or depression? Appraising each situation fairly, can I see where I've been at fault? Did these perplexities beset me because of selfishness or unreasonable demands? Or if my disturbance was seemingly caused by behavior of others, why did I lack the ability to accept the conditions I cannot change? These are the sort of fundamental inquiries that can disclose the source of my discomfort and indicate whether I may be able to alter my own conduct and so adjust myself serenely to the self-discipline. Suppose that financial insecurity constantly arouses these same feelings. I can ask myself, to what extent have my own mistakes fed my gnawing anxieties? And if the actions of others are not part of the cause, what can I do about that? If I am unable to change the present state of affairs, am I willing to take measures necessary to shape my life and conditions as they are? Questions like these, more of which will come to mind easily in individual cases, will help turn up the root causes.
Okay, so going back to where Janine started. Step 4 is but the beginning of a lifetime practice. So that's a really important line, right? A lot of people kind of come in through the program and they do a set of steps and that's kind of it. They kind of move on from there. But the first step 4 is only a beginning of a lifetime practice. And I love the word practice, right? This takes work. This takes like continual effort to be looking at ourselves and looking for spiritual progress in the actions that we do that may not be conducive to ourselves or relationships with other people. Because a lot of the things that we do in our lives, we go through the best of intention, we live through intention, but underneath the intention is the motive. So there's a lot of people that think that they're really nice and, you know, the world kind of shits on them or people are shitting on them and they don't seem to get a break because I'm so nice. And why do I keep getting the raw end of the deal? It's because a lot of the people that are just nice, they're living in a defect of trying to avoid conflict, but the conflict's never avoided because the conflict's in their own head. And if you allow somebody to take advantage of you over and over and over, and you build those patterns in your life, and you think that spirituality is about being nice, you're going to pay for that with a lot of people taking advantage of you, right? So a continuous look at our behaviors, at our patterns, and taking inventory as part of life is really important. And a lot of people get pissed off at taking inventory so much. And, you know, it talks about it in step 10, where it says, aren't these practices joy killers? Taking inventory, drearily rehearsing the omissions and commissions of yesterday and today. But there's an aspect of this inventory that pays off, and it often doesn't pay off till you're 2 or 3 years in sobriety. The thing about people in recovery is they don't take enough inventory to groove the inventory processes into their life. So they continually fight everyone and everything with many years sobriety. And they can't find that contentment. Without a willing and persistent effort to do this, there will be little sobriety or contentment for us. So it's important for us here on the screen today to understand that inventory, yeah, it might be a joy killer for you from time to time, but if you can groove this stuff in your life, it'll actually benefit your life in ways that you can't really see right now. And by finding the motive underneath the good intention that you live your life by, because under the intention, you know, everyone wants to be a nice person. Everyone is trying to do their best and all these things, you know, but we don't really see that sometimes we step on the toes of our fellows based on our own selfish, self-centered, self-pity, you know, depressive, instinctual defects. And then they retaliate. Seemingly without provocation. What did I do? I was just trying to help and be nice. But invariably, we find that sometime in the past, we made these decisions based in self. But the people that don't see the decisions that they made based in self that later placed them in the position to be hurt, it's because they're not exploring what we're talking about. They're not getting a grasp and they think that life's not treating them right. So then they redouble their efforts at trying more control or being nicer. And then it still fails because the motive's never actually exposed, or they resist and push the lesson away, right? Anything on that?
I just wanted to add, like, the part that you're talking about. So Bill was talking about the joy killing part about inventory, and that's in step 10, but the rest of that paragraph actually says, once this healthy practice has been become grooved, like you've got the discipline down and it's just a work in progress. You don't have to really put effort into it. It's a thing that just goes. Once this healthy practice has become grooved, it will be so interesting and profitable that the time it takes won't be missed. So it's like, once you get the habit down, and so Bill was mentioning there that people, they don't do the discipline enough to get the habit in a groove. And once you can do that, everything becomes actually easier in the realm of everything, really. But the inventory becomes kind of the default setting, and it becomes interesting. And that's why it's the default setting. I think for me, it's been like, it's curious, and I know that it's going to benefit me to figure it out. So once you realize, that it's you, you have a curious process about it, knowing that it's going to benefit you and change you for the better, and it's not such a bleak pain in the ass.
Awesome. So just in respect to what we both just said, that next line, it can be suggested that first we have a look at those personal flaws, which are acutely troublesome and fairly obvious. So when I talked about the tree, these are the obvious ones that are the branches on the tree. As you break the branches off on the tree, your basic defects that we can see that are pointed out in your first step 4, the more you go into the tree, the thicker the branch gets and it's harder to break. And then you get into the trunk of the tree, and now you're trying to break the trunk of a tree, which is much harder because these things are more deeply ingrained.
Give an example.
Yeah.
So an example of this was drawing out this tree with a sponsee, and one of the branches that she had identified. So the branches I explain are the things that you notice. So if I see you in a defect, what do I see you doing? And those are the branches. And so one of her branches was, I will walk by the dirty dishes in my kitchen and become passive aggressive because my kids haven't done the dishes, and I become passive aggressive. So it's like walking by and not saying anything. So then we take it down the branch, and it's like, why did that happen? Well, because I have fear of conflict, and I have fear of the honest communication. Well, why is that? And we're going down the tree, right? And it's like, so, well, I don't want the kids to be mad at me because then they're going to not want to hang out with me. Well, okay, well, what happens if they don't want to hang out with you? And then we're going down the branch. And like Bill was saying, it gets harder and harder to see because this shit's so insidious, and you got to get to the root, because that's where everything's coming from, causing the branches. And if you just cut off the branches, so if, say that I said, okay, the solution is you just got to do the dishes and do it cheerfully, your problems are solved. Well, that branch is going to grow into something else because the problem is not solved. Because as we continued down the tree, it was like, okay, so if the kids don't want to hang out with you, then what? Well, then I'm alone. And then what? And then it came down to, then my fear that I'm not good enough and that I'm not lovable and that I'll die alone will be true. It will feel like, and there's a real sense of like, even though logically, as we talk it out, it's like, well, that's irrational because your kids are always going to come back and they're not going to leave you and you're not going to die. Like, we don't need to conclude that from the dishes. But when you chase it down the tree to the root, that fear of being alone and not being good enough and all those things that go down there, but it's like, really, it's like the fear of being alone, because the instinct is to connect, right? Our biological instinct is to connect and to belong. And so if not, we will die. That is like why it's a biological instinct, because in caveman days, if you veered off, you die. You have to stay with the group. So therefore, we're hardwired to belong. And so if we sense that we don't belong, it can be a fear as big as death, even though it's not logically when you talk it out, but it can drive you blindly as much as you would die. Like you can, and you do these things and you chase them, and it's like powerfully. And that's why, because on a level, it's biologically hardwired to survive. And so it's like somewhere along the way it gets twisted and we're getting it all wrong, and the pen to paper sorts it out and it exposes it and it brings like the truth into it, and you can then move from it. But if you don't bring this stuff to the light, you don't even know that you're being driven by it. And this shit is really powerful. And it's like something so deep that it feels like death, and you're running like that, even though it's not. It's like, but those instincts are like that. They're there to keep us alive. So when we feel like we're going against them, it's like that. It's so powerful. So you chase it down, and then you can stop the branches, because once you identify the fear and you have a process to remove it,
you're not going to be getting the branches, because that was manifesting itself in a lot of ways, right? That could look like settling in a relationship. That can look like, not leaving your kid, or like your kid not leaving for college, and you running them to, like, I'm thinking of an example where the parent doesn't want the kid to go to college because she doesn't want to be alone, and she's trying to sabotage the kid's schooling and keep the kid home so that they don't go out of town. And it's like that's pretty big, and that's impacting your kids' lives. And, and that's how, but if you try to talk that out with them, they can't see it. And it's like, oh, but they're closer to home and it'll be easier to afford, and all these things, right? But if you can make clear what you're really being driven by, you have the power to actually change it. So.
And in that respect, so as we've wired, so she talked about we're naturally given this by God, but we've been wired by society and by our own traumas and our own fears of however it came to be, parenting, defense and coping mechanisms, or belief systems in our society that kind of hardwired us for some of these defects that we act out in. But they're driven by the instincts, and the instincts are just trying to find the wholeness of what they are based in love, but they keep grasping at the fear and the control. And the thing about trying to undo this is it's really difficult. Okay, you got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of grooving that pattern into your life. To undo that is really hard. And sometimes we even know in our intellectual mind that some of these behaviors aren't serving us, but we can't change it. Why? Because they're driven powerfully, blindly, and subtly. When we talk about powerlessness in this program, okay, we come in here and we're powerless over substances. But the real powerlessness is over the instincts that drive these behaviors. You ever tried to control your anger and, bite your tongue? Eventually you just blow up, right? Trying to control lust and sex desire and all these kinds of things. That's what drives you powerfully, blindly, subtly. Your desire to be accepted in your community of men and women and at work. So we act out in various defects that are selfish and self-centered that actually don't play out well in the future of what we're doing. But sometimes in that immediate instance where we use that, we get a bit of a payoff from it. But all we get is an immediate payoff. The character building isn't there, so it doesn't pay off in our lives over time. So that's why we need God to identify these things, to ask God to help us remove it, and to not get off the train of being willing to relinquish these things, because they're going to come up again and again and again. And sometimes we just want to throw in the towel and say, no, this is too hard. But no, if you do what's easy, which is throwing in the towel, then your life stays hard. But if you keep doing what's hard, you build character. And we kind of look for like purpose in our lives. The purpose of our lives lies within that micro moment of doing what's hard. You add up enough of those micro moments of challenging yourself to do what's hard with the power of God, you actually build purpose and strength and courage within your being, and you actually build true self-confidence from a place of where self-confidence should come from. And doing this over time is hard. And the other thing that we've done is the people around us that are close to us are already adapted to those behaviors, so they kind of expect that from us. So for my own example, when I was changing in around year 2, 3, and 4, when I really took this defective character stuff seriously and I really tried to implement it, my daughters and my ex-wife, they didn't like who I was turning into, because they had already been trained to act around me in a way that how I used to be. So once I was changing, they were like, who the hell are you anyway? Like, you're not even the dad that I know. You're not even the person that I knew. And I don't really like what's happening. But I stayed the course. I stayed the course. I stayed the course. And eventually they were like, holy shit, you've turned into the best version of yourself that I could have ever imagined. And although some of those times were painful because my kids didn't want to talk to me at certain times because they were fighting me, but I stood in my ground on the values and the depth of my truth of who I was in those moments. And then because they do love me, like Janine said, they did come back. But I didn't fucking waver on the values that I was building through the principles of the program. And eventually they even changed. because a lot of my behaviors that were negative was affecting them, and they were also building their own negative defects that were actually fucking up their own lives as well. So over the years now, I got 8 years sober. They've really taken to a lot of the changes that I've done and implemented it in the same ways that I have. And my kids today, you know, at one point they were like, quit talking about God and all this shit. Today, they often talk about God and creator and asking for help. And that's because I didn't veer off the path and I did what's hard, and my life has gotten a lot easier. And I'll finish with this. There's going to be pain either fucking way in your life. There's going to be the unremitting suffering of pain of not changing and not doing anything different, or there's going to be the positive, painful change of growth. Either way, you know, it's kind of like the flower that grows out of the crack of the concrete. You know, my pride and my anger is the concrete. And when I have a little crack and the light of reason can shine, a little rose or a flower can finally grow and maybe take over, right? So doing what's hard made my life easier. Anything else?
Yeah, I was just thinking about it's just the process of change is it's messy and it's uncertain for me. Like as you were talking about just when you were changing and stuff, I think there has to be also like, yes, you're standing in your values, and yes, as I've gone through this last thing where the work thing where I wanted to settle, and there was options in front of me that I could have made work, but like it wasn't feeling intuitively like it was the move to make, but I was running out of time. And I ended up like reaching out to a couple pillars and just basically like, one of them also worked for the same organization, and she was just like, do not settle for anything when you're going in, like don't, and she just got me back on track of like my ideals around what I was looking for and whatnot. And then this opportunity came, and it was like almost unbelievable because it not only checked all the boxes, but it had a better schedule for my situation. And I walked out of the building and I was like, holy smokes, like I just couldn't even believe it. And yet I could believe it because, you know, this is what we hear happening. And but I thought, geez, like how did I conduct myself through those times of being, you know, uncertain? Like what was my conduct like? And going back over it, and it's like I wasn't feeling like it wasn't going to work. I wasn't ever like doubting it, but I also wasn't like I wasn't assured and just walking around like I was super confident and butterflies and rainbows. Like I was getting stressed, and I was trying to navigate my new recovered self within all of that. And it, of course, in hindsight, it's like, okay, well, I could have been more cheerful knowing it was going to work out, because I did, but yet I wasn't. So it's like, I've really have to look at how the change process has been, if this makes any sense at all. It's like when he was describing the anger, it's like, yes, you're standing in your values, yes, but there's also an aspect of self that doesn't know what self you're turning into. And it's like, these people don't like it, and I feel like my life isn't getting any better from what I can see, and now I'm getting some like kickback from over here, and is what I'm doing right? Because there was that time, and there's been that time for me a few times now where life has come at me where I'm like, wait a minute, like there's a lot of things around me that kind of seem like I'm not going in the right direction. Like I'm coming up against these things that maybe if I was to think about them without talking to pillars, it would look like life is putting blocks in front of me, and maybe I'm forcing my will, and maybe it's not, but that's not it at all. It was that life is putting like these challenges in front of me, and what am I going to do? The comfort or the character building, and all of these things can look very confusing. And to try and do this on your own, or to try and even sort it out on your own, like, I mean, just even what I went through this last couple of months with, like, now I can see it clearly in hindsight, but going through it is a whole nother thing where, you know, like I was kind of fumbling in the dark and doing what I'm supposed to, and just doing my best. And some days it was like, I just needed to be quiet because I felt like I was going to be lashing out all over just doubt and judgment and scaring people around me. So it was a really sloppy process, but I got through that. And then now I'm like, okay, so now I got a little bit more proof, you know, a little bit more proof that this is what goes on. And then as I go, I'm getting more and more confident in my values and more assured in the new self that I'm creating in recovery and that God is restoring me back to. But it's a like process. And sometimes I just need to be quiet because I don't trust what's going to come out of my mouth. And so I just wanted to say that because it's like the change process is hard, and it's hard for lots of reasons. And for me, it's been that I feel like I'm going through it blindfolded a lot of times.
Awesome. I'm just going to talk quickly about these questions. All these questions, we're not going to go through these questions that they're asking, right? How and when, and how, and then just when instances did my selfish pursuit of sex, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of questions. Just to be clear, these questions are not done instead of like your step 4. A regular step 4 in the big book is really important to do as it's laid out. But I will highlight that a lot of these questions can like amplify the 4th column in the resentments and maybe some of your selfishness and your resentment conduct or sex conduct, but it's all based in fear. So all of these questions can be dug into in the actual work done in the step 4 in the big book. These questions just enhance, and the 12 and 12 is never used instead of the big book. So if your sponsor is sponsoring you just by like the 12 and 12 only, that's not what we do. We go through the big book and then we use this as like a 2.0 version and we kind of add to it. Okay. So, and why I say that is because I've met a lot of people said that they've been sponsored and their sponsor only took them through the 12 and 12. You're not going to get your vital spiritual experience typically out of the 12 and 12. But as you work recovery and you're a year or 2 sober and now you're in this 12 and 12, now this shit can launch you into the next level. So there's a whole bunch of questions here. You can go through them and it'll help your inventory at whatever point in your life you need to. And I would say read this material in this 12 and 12 like once a year or more, right? Read it when you're in meetings and just pull it up and read it while the meeting's going on and just kind of see what hits you. On the next page, page 52, it talks about cross-examine themselves ruthlessly to determine their own personal defects and thus demolish their security. So in the big book, it says we are to be hard on ourselves and considerate of others. There's a lot of people in the program that are new or people that are giving the message that we're supposed to be really kind and considerate to ourselves. That's true, but that comes naturally on its own over time. The self-love that you need will come over time. But in the beginning, we are to be hard on ourselves. And it says here, examine yourself ruthlessly to see your defects. And that's really important, right? The self-love will come as you relinquish these defects over time. And self-love comes really strong later in like year 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, because more of the stuff in the 3rd column where the instincts are pushing it up, the guilt and shame, the stuff that's below in the roots of the tree, the guilt, the shame, the self-worth, all of that stuff starts boiling itself up. And you can see it better later on. And so you can see, more of your own self-love later on.
Well, and I think also like going back to just this self-esteem and how you don't just think yourself into self-love. You have to actually go out and do good things and esteemable action. And then through that, through those new behaviors, you change how you're thinking about yourself, which then changes how you feel about yourself. I also just wanted to add to, before we move on, that like when I meet people who talk to people or get phone calls from people who are spinning out sober, this is like where you go. If you take a person into this exact part, this is looking at the 3 areas I think people get sober and then they get drunk on in sobriety, is like the job, the relationship, and the spending. And that's it right there. So you can go through and I almost guarantee you will nail it by the time you're done on why if they can be honest with you, that you're going to find that they're either overspending or overdoing it in the work area or the relationship area. There's some things that they're doing that need to be straightened out. So this is a good conversation point for people who are sober but spinning out sober.
Okay. And then a little bit further down, a little tiny bit further down, worry, anger, self-pity, and depression. These are the most common symptoms of emotional insecurity. So that's to be noted, right? And they're the most cunning, right? They're the most cunning. They're the hardest to see. When you're in victimhood or depression or self-pity, those ones are really hard to see. But as you bring awareness to it, you can identify it quicker and deal with it quicker, and it doesn't like take you down the rabbit hole. The sooner you can identify these things and take action in the positive way through the practical approaches laid out in our program, i.e. talking to pillars, inventory, prayer, meditation, all these things, you can stop the spin. Because if you don't get a handle on it, you'll spin right down to the bottom. And then to get back out of that bottom is pretty tough. And sometimes, you know, oblivion only looks possible when you're down there. A couple lines down from that. To take inventory in this respect, we ought to consider carefully all personal relationships which bring continuous or reoccurring trouble. And that line is important, but to admit that certain relationships bring us reoccurring trouble, sometimes it's hard to admit, okay? So if I want to be in a relationship and I'm like holding on to the relationship with everything I got, but all it does is bring me insecurity, discontentment, and reoccurring trouble, but I don't want to let it go, my pride is going to say, no, that one's actually pretty good. But you got to get accurately honest. You got to get rigorously honest with yourself and go, you know what? I do sell out a lot of my truth for this relationship. I'm always trying to put band-aids on it. I'm always trying to please this other person. I'm always, you know, and sometimes the reoccurring trouble isn't always like outward. It's not like anger where you guys are fighting. Sometimes the reoccurring trouble can just be how you feel on the inside. So we got to look at these things like carefully and take inventory on relationships that cause continuous or reoccurring trouble. But pride is going to get in the way, and it's not going to want you to do that sometimes. And because we have these instincts that hold on to the emotional thread of the relationship, because we used to get some type of emotional value from it at one point in our lives, we want to hang on to that. We feel like we owe it to them sometimes because we can't let them go, because what are they going to do without me? All relationships are meant to come and go. And you have to learn how to cut that emotional thread and let the person learn their own lessons. Because we don't learn our lessons unless we're, you know, the necessity of life drives us. That like desperation of life drives us sometimes. And if they're not desperate, if I'm not desperate, I'm not going to learn my lesson because I'm still holding on to some type of false hope that doesn't allow me to grow and learn. So that unremitting suffering that's painful, it stays in my life. Where I'm going to grow is I cut the tie to that relationship, and then I learn how to be better with me and God, and I learn about who I am. And like Janine said, sometimes that's really painful. But the book, 12 and 12, step 10, the pains of drinking had to come before sobriety, but inner turmoil before serenity. And it's the inner turmoil that has to come. And each circumstance has its own level and length of the inner turmoil, however long it takes you to learn the lesson and what it takes to learn that lesson.
I think the inner turmoil too is I think of it as like change theory or whatever, that the conflict has to precede the change, because otherwise we would just keep going. We would just go and there wouldn't be anything to change. Your engine is going just fine and things are good. So there's no need to level up or to take a look at yourself or take a look at the things around you and how you can be better. So when you start coming up against yourself, you know, that's a good thing. Like that emotional pain is an indicator that you're about to move up if you do it properly, you know, if you do it. So just recently, like this thing with cutting the thread, this used to drive me nuts when Bill would say this. I'm like, Bill, like it's so negative, but it's like there should never be a thread in the first place. You know, like we're supposed to just love each other without fear, and the threads and stuff. I feel like in my life it's been like the fear that I want to keep the person there, that I'm scared to just let it go. And if I've let it go And then the relationship, like I've been best friends with my best friend since grade 1, and she's not an alcoholic. And, you know, like I have really demonized her with my drinking. We have hundreds of stories. At one point in time, we were living together, and that was not a good experience for her. And she was closing the bar for me, doing my job, because I would get so drunk and she would have to come and close because I had to pay the rent and she needed to do that. And then she stopped talking to me for a few years, and then we found our way again. And then, you know, just recently when I went back out, we had to stop talking. And she does that because that's the direction. She can't support it, and she can't. And had I just stayed out there, we wouldn't be talking anymore, right? But I do my thing to get well, and then the relationships that are supposed to be there, they find themselves. And so the people that I love, that when I'm doing the thing that I'm supposed to be doing, my relationships, the people that are around me are the ones that I want around me and that I love around me. And I don't find people are just exiting my life. Like, when I don't think that that's really a thing. Like, when people exit my life, it's like they go off to college, or they go off to, their life is taking us on journeys, and they can be a phone call away if they want. But, you know, like I read a study a few years back that was talking about Facebook, and it said, you know, this idea that we can have 700 friends, we can't. We can only have a certain amount of people in our close proximity to be able to have a quality of a relationship. And so to me, it's like every day it's who's around me. Just give your best to whoever's in front of you, and give your best and be sober and try and live by these principles. And God is just taking me on a journey. So who's meant to be there will be there. And if they leave, I've learned it's not a painful thing. I don't feel like they're leaving and it's this dramatic thing and they're going off into the abyss, and relationships aren't coming to an abrupt stop because of fuckery. And, you know, like, it's just, there's a security in just being, and there's not this grab for, you know, I explain it to people like, if you have a relationship and you're holding the sand, and people want to hold the sand, well, the best way to get the sand from the beach back to your hotel room is to hold it just like this, not like this, because the more you try to hold it, the more you're going to actually push out your fingers. And so you want to just like be with people just like this. And you can do that with the principles here, because fear is what makes us go like this. And our fear causes us to meet the enemy on the road that we're traveling to avoid it. And we cause a self-fulfilling prophecy, so to speak. And we actually cause those things to come into our reality that we fear the most by trying to cling and grab, and the instincts going in excess and trying to take more than, and it's all fear-based. And so if you can, when we work this program, that's the biggest thing where we get a freedom, is that the fear, we learn how to live with fear, because it's not an absence of fear. We're human beings. It's just, what do we do with the fear? Well, we just go, hey, that's a fear. And we do what we're supposed to do. And we don't let the fear dictate and drive our behavior. And we're not blindly led by the fear. And we can just see it, and we can keep going, and we can keep going in the direction that we need to go. And we're not settling, and we're not getting distracted by the things like the bar isn't low anymore for me. But like, it's just, life becomes so much easier, including the relationships.
And fourth. Okay. I'm just going to go to the bottom of 52, where it says questions like these, all these questions and more, which will continue to come to mind in each individual case, will help turn up root causes. So just like I said, like 10 minutes ago, all of these questions, if you take them to the fore, you can go deeper into that third column. And the third column is actually the more important column once you have some time in, because the third column is where the roots are. You know, there's a line in Bill's story, we ask our newfound friend to remove these things root and branch. And it's the branches where we got to start, and we work down our way down the trunk, and we get into the root system. And the root system is basically those instincts that are, you know, we haven't got our needs met at some point, or we built different mechanisms, but down there is where we can start mending these. And down there is actually where we need God the most. And God the most is actually in us, and it's based in love. So we kind of go through life like this. I'm a baby, boom, boom, boom. Then I fracture, and then I'm acting out in all these fractures. So when we say trying to get back to God as we understood him, we're actually doing all the work at, like, for me, it's like I'm 51 now, and I'm slowly relinquishing the factors to try to get back to God as I understood him. Back to when did I understand God? When I was a little baby, before I had went through my journey of life and fractured myself based on traumas and, different life circumstances and belief systems and the fears that come with it all. Now we're kind of relinquishing the fear. Every time I relinquish fear, I become more whole again. So I'm getting back to God as I understand him when I understood him before I was fractured, right? So now in the root of a lot of my life, there's a lot of love there, and there's a lot of not broken, defective behavior today. And if there is, I can at least identify it, talk to Janine, talk to my pillars, talk to God, and then go mend that with an honest and vulnerable conversation based in love, not in pride. And if the other person's open to it, and they often will be if you're based in love too, because love actually chips away at other people's pride. And sometimes it takes a bit of time, but that's okay. So we're on page 53, the first full paragraph at the top.
So I think what I had just talked about before the break kind of captures this whole paragraph. Is just like what's talking about twisted relationships with people are the problem, and how we were just saying fear at the end, at the bottom of the tree. Fear that's come from, our instincts combined with our life experiences, and then those life experiences we created solutions to work through those life experiences, like we did with the alcohol. But like in Bill's story, it turns on him, and the alcohol becomes the sword that cuts him to ribbons. That's what it's like for us trying to use our defects to protect us from life. And so as a result of that, we have really messy relationships with people that look like what it's describing here. We're leaning too heavily on people, and then where we put people on pedestals and then they fail us, or we're, putting all these demands. And so all of that is this, like we talked about. And so in doing the steps and being able to identify what's at the root, we're able to relinquish this, and it becomes this. And then as a result, we have much better relationships with people. And that was the root of the issue all along. Like it says here, is that's how it was manifesting, right? Is our interactions with people. So moving from this to this through the steps. And then I think,
why don't you read it?
the whole paragraph again. Okay.
Talk about
I thought you wanted to finish, but it is from our twisted relations with family and friends and society at large that many of us have suffered the most. We have been especially stupid and stubborn about them. The primary fact is we fail to recognize is our total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. Our egomania digs two disastrous pitfalls. Either we insist on dominating the people we know, or we depend on them far too much. If we lean too heavily on people, they will sooner or later fail us, for they are human too and cannot possibly meet our incessant demands. In this way, our insecurity grows and festers. When we habitually try to manipulate others to our willful desires, they recoil or revolt and resist us heavily. Then we develop hurt feelings, a sense of persecution, and a desire to retaliate. As we redouble our efforts at control and continue to fail, our suffering becomes acute and constant. We have not once sought to be one in a family, to be a friend among friends, to be a worker among workers, to be a useful member of society. Always we struggled to be at the top of the heap or to hide underneath it. This self-centered behavior blocked a partnership relation with any one of those about us. Of true brotherhood, we had small comprehension. Some will object to many of the questions posed because we think that their own character defects have not been so glaring. To those, it can be suggested that a conscious examination is likely to reveal the very defects objectionable questions are concerned with. Because our surface record hasn't looked too bad, we have frequently been abashed to find that this is so simply because we have buried these same defects deep down under thick layers of self-justification. Whatever the defects, they have finally ambushed us into alcoholism and misery. Therefore, thoroughness ought to be watched forward when taking inventory. In this connection, it is wise to write out our questions and answers. It will aid It will be an aid to clear thinking and honest appraisal. It will be the first tangible evidence of our complete willingness to move forward.
Boom. So first things first, step 4 is our first tangible evidence of our willingness to move forward. It's not at step 1, and it's not at step 2 or step 3. Step 4 is where the pen to paper happens. That's where the work begins, and that's where the truth starts to get revealed. And that's where we're going to start relinquishing. And that's the first tangible evidence of our willingness to move forward. But coming back to page 53, Janine kind of touched on it already, the twisted relations with family and friends, society at large that many of us have suffered the most. Probably won't talk much about that because we have been talking about that primarily through this whole session and the other sessions.
You don't want to read it again?
But I will read the next sentence.
Okay.
The primary fact that we fail to recognize is our total inability to form a true partnership with another human being. So Bill W., who wrote this literature, is saying the number one thing that we won't recognize is our total inability to form a true partnership with any other human being. Couple lines down, if we lean too heavily on people, they will sooner or later fail us, for they are human too, and cannot possibly meet our incessant demands. In this way, our insecurity grows and it festers. So basically what we're talking about, when you look at tradition 7, we are self-supporting through our own contributions, declining outside contributions. Through the work that we do in step 6, we actually start navigating the challenges of self, and through external, usually it's triggered by the external world, but the work is done on the internal world. And as we navigate those challenges with God in our pocket, as our guider, we can become self-supporting through our own contributions with God and with our own selves. And we can slowly over time quit leaning too heavily on people, because they are human too, and they can't meet our incessant demands. And when we keep trying to do that, we end up redoubling our efforts at more control and more love and attention from them. And then our insecurity grows and it festers even worse. And then we fall deeper into self, into depression and self-pity and, these things. So learning how to really navigate step 6, which we'll highlight here in a minute when we start reading it again. When we habitually try to manipulate others for our own willful desires, we've been talking about that for the last 2 or 3 sessions. They revolt and resist us heavily. Then we develop hurt feelings and a sense of prosecution and a desire to retaliate. So in the step 3 in the big book, it talks about making decisions based in self that later place us in a position to be hurt. But we invariably find that sometimes in the past, we make these decisions. And that's exactly what it's talking about. Am I trying to be self-seeking? Am I trying to use like kindness and generosity? And what am I trying to get out of using these manipulative tactics to actually get what I want? And if I don't get what I want, he may be sometimes mean, egotistical. And then I'll use the other way to try to get what I want. And then as I continue to not get what I want, I do it even more. And it really lays it out nicely in the step 3 in the big book. Okay. And we continue to fail, our suffering becomes acute and constant. I think that's it for me on the rest of this reading. Okay. So we're gonna go into the step 6 again, like we started a few weeks ago. And we're gonna kind of just skim through these first 2.5 pages. And it was the first 2.5 pages we read. And then we bounced into the step 4 to really highlight the instincts and these defects. So I'll read this one. Step 6, we're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character. This is the step that separates the men from the boys. So declares a well-loved clergyman who happens to be one of AA's greatest friends. He goes on to explain that any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try repeatedly step 6 on all his faults without reservation, whatever, has indeed come a long way spiritually. So I just want to highlight something there. So this is the step that separates the men from the boys. Later in this chapter, it talks about what is the distinction. Well, I'll give it to you now. The man is going to seek a perfect objective, working with love and God. And the boy is going to seek the immediate objective of self and get the immediate payoff and not build character. They're going to get the relief out of their ego. Whereas the man's going to fucking relinquish the need for the ego to get it and trust that God's going to take him to better things. And it does say here enough willingness and honesty. But before you have the willingness and honesty, you have to have the awareness. Without the awareness of what you're thinking and what you're feeling, the willingness and honesty doesn't even really matter. So that's why we've been highlighting the defects and how they're working in our lives and how to spot them before we're going into this. And that's what the step 4 and the 5 do. So any person capable of enough willingness and honesty to try what? Repeatedly, over and over and over. Step 6, relinquishment of these things to God on all his faults, not some of them, all of them, without any reservations, whatever. And I love how they have that italicized, because the goal, when you work on this without reservation, at some point you will act in your life without reservation. Usually the reservation to be nice or kind or compassionate or loving or whatever, it always starts with, what am I going to not get? How am I going to look? And what am I going to lose? So there's always a reservation before we act. But once we practice this and down the road, you will act like that without reservation. Okay? Has indeed come a long way, what? Spiritually. And when you look at the word spiritual, it's spirit, ritual. Ritual means like doing something over and over and over and over. So the process of being aware, being honest, being willing, and trying something new, bringing God in, talking to somebody immediately, making amends quickly if we have harmed anyone, and then turning our thoughts to someone we can help. That's step 10 I'm talking about. Through that ritual, we come a long way spiritually. We grow closer to God. And is therefore entitled to be called a man who is sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of his own creator. Of course, the often disputed question of whether God can and will, under certain conditions, remove defects of character will be answered by a prompt affirmative by almost any AA member. To him, this proposition will be no theory at all. It will be about the largest fact of his life. So for me, step 6 is the largest fact of my life. And I do believe God can remove these defects of character. I hear in the rooms all the time, well, they don't actually get removed forever. I got to live with them. I don't believe that to be true. I have worked on a lot of my defective character to the point where it doesn't come back. So I don't believe that God can't remove it. I know he can because I'm living experience that he can. The people that say shit like that are people that haven't done what I'm talking about. Or they're only at a certain level of their recovery and they haven't relinquished those things. Or they're not using God or whatever. But I know God can remove these things if I'm willing to bring them to the surface and willing to do my part in banishing them. And that has been the biggest fact of my life. And I started in step 6, not step 10. I understood the theory of step 6, and I was super willing to try this stuff. And I keep trying today. But it's actually worked in the step 10, which I didn't realize for about a year after I started studying step 6. Okay, sure, I was beaten. Absolutely licked. My own willpower just wouldn't work on alcohol. Change of scene, best efforts of my family, friends, doctors, and clergymen got me no place with my alcoholism. I simply couldn't stop drinking, and no human being could seem to do the job for me. But when I became willing to clean house, then asked a higher power, God as I understood him, to give me release, my obsession to drink vanished. It was lifted right out of me. In AA meetings all over the world, statements just like this are heard daily. It is plain for everybody to see that each sober AA member has been granted a release from the very obstinate and potentially fatal obsession. So in a very complete and literal way, all AAs have become entirely ready to have God remove the mania for alcohol from their lives. And God has proceeded to do exactly that. Having been granted a perfect release from alcoholism, why shouldn't we then be able to achieve by the same means a perfect release from every other difficulty or defect? Question mark. This is the riddle of our existence, the full answer of which may be only in the mind of God. Nevertheless, at least part of the answer is apparent to us. So on that paragraph, if God can remove the mania for alcohol from me, why can't he do the same with these defects and the difficulties that I have? And he put a question mark there. And this is the riddle of our existence, right? A question that can't be answered, right? But the full answer of which may be only in the mind of God. God knows everything. He's all knowing. So the answer is in the mind of God. But at least part of the answer, nevertheless, part of the answer is apparent to us, meaning I got to do my part of the work and I got to bring it there and show and expose it. So another thing you'll hear in the rooms that I don't do anything, God removes these. Yeah, okay. But God isn't going to do anything for me that I can do for myself either. And I have to do some of the work too. And when I really invest the step 3 decision, because really what step 6 is, it's the investment of what step 3 is asking. It's me learning how to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood him. My will and my life is my defect in the way that I run my life. And if I can turn that over, then I'm living in God's will in a way more loving and principled way. Anything?
Keep going. I do have stuff, but
Yeah.
I can wait.
When men and women pour so much alcohol into themselves that they destroy their lives, they commit the most unnatural act. Defying their instinctive desires for self-preservation, they seem bent upon self-destruction. They work against their own deepest instinct. As they are humbled by the terrific beating administered by alcohol, the grace of God can enter and expel the obsession. Here, their most powerful instinct can fully cooperate with their creator's desire to give them new life. For nature and God alike abhor suicide. But most of our other difficulties don't fall under such a category at all. Every normal person wants, for example, to eat, reproduce, and be somebody in society. So just to highlight, we are now talking about the instincts again. First page of step 4, first page and a half or so. This is kind of what we're getting into. For example, eat, reproduce, and be somebody in society of his fellows. And he wishes to be reasonably safe and secure as he tries to attain these things. Indeed, God made him that way. He did not design man to destroy himself by alcohol, but he did give man instincts to help him stay alive. It is nowhere evident, at least in this life, that our Creator expects us to fully eliminate our instinctual drives. So as far as we know, it is nowhere on the record that God has completely removed any human being from all his natural drives. Since most of us are born with an abundance of natural desires, isn't it strange that we often let these far exceed their intended purpose? When they drive us blindly, or we willfully demand that they supply us with more satisfactions or pleasures than are possible, or even due to us, that is the point which we depart from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth. That is the measure of our defects, character defects, or if you wish, our sins. If we ask, God will certainly forgive our derelictions, but in no case does he render us white as snow and keep us that way without our cooperation. That is something we're supposed to be willing to work towards ourselves. He only asks that we try the best that we know to make progress in the building of character. So I'm going to stop there for a second. So when we're talking about these instincts that are given by God to help us preserve life and live our best life, they were kind of given to us in this circle, okay? And when we take them outside of that circle, when they drive us blindly outside of this normal realm of how they should be used, or we willfully demand that they supply us with more satisfactions and pleasures that are even possible or due to me, that's when we depart from the degree of perfection. We depart from the circle and we go outside the circle to try to grasp and take and fill the holes that are deep inside of us with things from outside of us. And the further I go out of the circle, the more pain I cause myself and the more pain I cause others. So we're trying to kind of get back into this circle and work within like the God-given aspect of what the instincts were intended for. And that's where it says that is the measure of our character defects. So outside of that circle is where your defects start becoming problematic. Or if you wish, our sins. But if we ask God, he will certainly forgive our dereliction. So God's going to forgive me, but no case does he render me white as snow and keep me that way without my cooperation. I have to be willing to work towards that myself. And he only asks that I try the best that we know to make progress in the building of character. So how I get that forgiveness is I keep trying to better myself. And when I seemingly make a mistake, and this is kind of the essence of step 6, is we're not being perfect here. You can't be perfect. Okay. We can live towards perfection and live towards love and try to do things in a loving way. That's actually perfection. So as long as we have the best possible attitude and growing on this beginning of this lifetime job, that's really what we're asking for in step 6. We're not asking for perfection. So if I'm really, like in my innermost self, really want to change and be and grow in the image and likeness of my creator, and I go out into the world and I fuck shit up, and it's not intentional, but I did it, or my instincts drove me powerfully, blindly, and subtly, and it looks like I made a mistake and I acted in a way that other people are like, oh, what a fucking asshole. The intention is within me, within the beholder. The humility lies within myself, not within the viewer. So as long as I'm walking that path, and I've learned that I can't just walk that path by myself, because I can rationalize and justify the most errant bullshit in my life to suit my actions in my life and my inaction. So I got to rely on pillars like Janine or Chris, who's here, my sponsor, and people. And as long as I know that they know, then it gives me a sense of security and like I'm going in the right direction. Although there might be 100 other people judging me and pointing the fucking finger and saying, look at that selfish asshole and what he just did. I don't let that shit bother me anymore, because I know in my heart that I'm trying something better. And I think that's really what me as a sponsor, I really try to implore people to believe in themselves and stay close in that flat tire 5, those people who really give a fuck about you. And then at some point you gain that self-supporting through your own contributions and the truth of yourself, because you're walking authentically in who you want to be. And as you walk down that path towards the truth based in love, sometimes we got to stand in the fear of what the truth is at the moment, but that's okay, because we're on the journey to the truth. And the only way to the Father is through that fucking truth. And a lot of that truth may be fear along the way. Okay. So anything?
Well, and I think a lot of that truth comes in mistakes, you know, like I think about when I was like, Bill, like, how do I know if this is the right thing? And it was like, you don't, like, you do your best, like as this lays out, and you walk towards it. And if you make a mistake, you recalibrate and you collect the data and you see, because, so I'll give an example, like one of my best friends, in program, just was going through some stuff that, well, so got into a relationship with a person that kind of like checked the boxes on paper, and the relationship fizzled out after some time, and it was like, well, what happened? Where did it go wrong? And it was like they got the relationship and they didn't move in or anything, but there's a dog involved, and the relationship crumbles, and then it was revealed that geez, I see that I was saying yes when I meant no, and I agreed at the beginning to things that wouldn't be okay in the long run, and just little things like, yeah, I like sports, and yeah, I like things that, you know, faking the compatibility, that I know that so well, because that I used to do that codependency piece, right? Where it's like, oh yeah, I love all of this stuff. And you mirror the person, and then the relationship crumbles. The shelf life of that is, I think, if you make it to a year, you're lucky. So this happens, but it wasn't until this happened that we were able to unpack that and to really see some of this insidious self stuff. And like a year ago, it wasn't able to be identified because there hadn't been enough sober patterns, so to speak. So the relationship unfolds, and in my opinion, the relationship was a success, because there was so much that came out of it. And that it's like, okay, I see that, you know, when I say these small concessions, when I say, yes, that's okay, but I know that it's not okay and I'm kind of annoyed, I just got to say that. I just got to speak up and be honest in the moment. And if the person stays and we're compatible through that, it's meant to be. But if I don't say something, and then I contort the relationship in that small way, then it's not going to be able to be sustained, because the truth of who I am is going to be revealed, and I'm just prolonging the inevitable, and how important it is, even in those small moments, to speak up and say, like, this is actually how I feel. And those small moments of speaking up aren't small at all. Those things add up to big things. And in this case, it was like the relationship just wasn't compatible. And so we got into this interesting discussion about, like, they were just saying, oh, I just want like the simple life, I think of this and that, like listing off the simple life, walking the dog and this and that. And I said, so what about the simple life is appealing? And so he was talking about that. And then it just occurred to me actually to send this meme. So I made him a meme and I sent it to him, and it was like Buzz Lightyear and the little other character. And it was like, what if I told you the simple life is not out there? And it really resonated, because the stuff in here, the head, when it's like this, what do we want to do? Instead of straightening it out on a spiritual level, we want to straighten it out in our environment, in our relationship, and put all these things in place that if all of this is in place, I will be okay here. But that's a bad equation, and it doesn't work. And you don't just learn that by doing a step 4 and 5. You got to piss around in step 6. Unfortunately, you just got to piss around and learn. And then you see the stuff that you're that you're contending with is that it's all up here and what's going on. And once you learn that, and then you see it come up again, now you have the opportunity to grab for 7, which is like, okay, I see that there's a better way. My will isn't good here. God's will is, and there's a better way. And I can just reach for that. I don't need to have to be beaten and bludgeoned by my pain of the defects. I don't have to be my self-will beating me up to the point that I'm just bloody and beaten going into, I can just reach for 7 as the ideal that's easier and softer anyways. And so, but you don't get to reach for 7 until you've fucked around in 6 so much and hurt yourself, and you're convinced now, just like with alcohol, it's like you're convinced that any life run on alcohol is not going to be good. You're at a bottom with it. But for me, all of my defects have come, not all of them, but the ones I've contended with so far, have come because I am convinced that me doing it my way and me pissing around is not going to be successful. And that step 7 is the easier way all along. But step 7 came from the emotional turmoil, which causes the surrender. But within that emotional turmoil, the part that's different for me today now is that I am convinced that there's not a better way that I can see besides doing it with God's will. And step 6 was like when I got out of treatment, and the treatment center that I went to was big on sponsoring, and which was great, because it really put a fire under my butt to figure it out, because I didn't know how I was going to be able to explain it if I couldn't explain it in a meeting. And then I had a person asking me how to go through 6 and 7. And I knew that it wasn't just a paragraph. I knew that there was something that I was missing, because 6 and 7 were like, bloop, bloop. And then when I met Bill, like I was on that 6 and 7 search. And when he explained it to me, it just made so much sense. And I'm the kind of person that I need to know the why about something for me to want to do it. Like, okay, that all sounds good, but why do I want to do it this way? And that's what I was really looking for. And I didn't understand, like, I get why we're doing it on a logical level, but why are we doing it? And we're doing it to be restored to the authentic person that I was supposed to be all along. That's my why, is that when I'm acting in defects, and like, Bill talks about, to sin is to miss the mark. And for me, how I've made sense of this, I had a lot of plays. I was in a lot of church plays when growing up as a child. And there was this one particular one that had a little rap song about the hole in your heart. And it's just stuck with me. So it was, this kid came and he did his little rap part, and he said, this hole down deep in your heart is a void that you try to avoid, but it aches and it stings as you fill it with things, but the things don't bring you any joy. So you party and you bop, you shop till you drop, but you still don't feel any peace. You try to hide, but you're sad inside. God knows your heart, he sees. And then the chorus was just about this hole. And I just, it was profound to me through my life, thinking about just like, I do have this hole, and it was always with me, that this hole that I have. and I could see myself filling it with things that weren't working, but I didn't know how to fill it with God. I just couldn't figure it out. And the steps have allowed me to do that, because they, in my opinion, they've been the most logical, like it's a no fail, follow these instructions to get a connection with God. And that's what I've been looking for my whole life. And so for step 6, the first defect that I can say that I was able to really see this working was getting out of the affair, where I was at this jumping off place with it, where I couldn't see myself with him or without him. And I just couldn't imagine not being able to talk to him, but I didn't want to talk to him, And so how this stuff made sense to me was that we did the ideals, and it's like, what would I do instead? And I talk about this a lot, but I envisioned it like, so what would I do instead when I'm bored or lonely? Instead of reaching for the relationship or any man in general, because that was something I really saw, like alcoholism coming around, like my relationships were a mess. And so that was like the next area that I needed to apply this to. So it was like, well, what would I do instead? When then I have my list, like I'll call my sponsor, I'll call a sponsee, I'll spend time with my kids, I'll spend time with positive friends. Fine. And I did that. And it took about 3 months to get some relief. But as that was going on, and I just did it moment by moment. That was how I did it, is like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. And that's just what I kept telling myself. There's this one moment I got to get through, and then the moment stacked up and it became easier and easier. And I was becoming more and more convinced. But I thought of it as a scab. So it's like, if I have an injury, if I have a scab from life, right? And I don't allow the time to heal it, because I keep picking it. So in this case, it was that every time that I picked up the phone to text him when I was bored or lonely, all I was doing was re-injuring myself. I wasn't allowing that to heal. And so, what would I do instead? Hey, God, give me the strength to do this thing instead, like just whatever that is. And I knew my will was this. So God's will was, in my opinion at the time, was anything but this. And so I would do the other thing. And in that, I envisioned the scab healing and being able to heal. And I thought of it like that every time I pick up the phone, I'm going to rip off the healing that's happened so far. And I just need to stop, and I need to not pick the scab, and I need to let it heal. And every time I act in defect and message him when I'm bored or lonely, and I initiate that again, I'm going back to the defect and I'm hurting myself. And so every time that I didn't do that, I envisioned God was healing me and restoring me back to a healed version of who I was supposed to be. And over time that passed, and I became okay on my own. And I had never been able to do that. In fact, that was like a bigger miracle to me than not drinking, was my ability to change how I operated when it came to relationships. And it's still like I'm nowhere near where I want to be, but I'm not in a codependent mess, and nor do I have a desire to be, and I'm not lonely or fearful, or like, I'm just okay on my own. And I would have never ever thought that was possible. And so when this step 6 is talking about like the logic of, well, of course, like if God could remove the miraculous thing like alcohol from an alcoholic, why could he not remove a defect like from me in this case? And so I put that to the test, and that was the first test that I put. And through that, I became convinced that this program really was going to do for me all of the things that I was trying to do for myself and fall short, because again, like to me, the bigger miracle was that I got out of that relationship that had such a grasp on me for so many years. And I did it just through this and 6 and 7, and just listening to what he was saying to me and then trying it. And it worked. And through that was like, that to me was more convincing than me quitting drinking, actually. And so it really got me passionate about this step and about the program overall, in the hope that it would work for me long term.
Nice. Okay. So step 6, bottom of 65. We're entirely ready to have God remove all these defects of character is AA's way of stating the best possible attitude. Like I was talking about earlier, the best possible attitude one can take in order to make a beginning of this lifetime job. This does not mean that we expect all of our character defects to be lifted out of us as the drive to drink was. As Janine so elegantly stated, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I fucking never heard that. A few of them may be, but with most of them, we shall have to be content with patient improvement. And to get to the point where there's patient improvement and being content with that, sometimes it takes a while of maybe not even seeing any improvement. But that's not the point. The point is that we try this with honesty and willingness, and we try this repeatedly on all our faults without reservation. And as we don't see, like, you can't really see millimeters on a yardstick, right? But it doesn't mean that you haven't moved. If you're 10 millimeters up the yardstick, you've moved, but you might not be able to see that. Where you start to see that is maybe once you get a decimeter, right? 100 millimeters, then you're like, holy shit, I'm actually moving. So sometimes we can't see the growth, which is why it's so important to have those people who really believe in you so that they can show you that growth, because our alcoholic minds sometimes distract us from where we actually are and what's actually going on.
Wait, you know, last night when we were talking about just like parenting stuff and how if you say no 100 times and then you say yes on 101, you've just undone that 100 times, and the kid's gonna sense that, and you're starting from ground zero. I would say that picking the scab analogy is similar to that, where if you're trying to really heal in an area, and a month goes by or whatever, some periods of time go by, or some moments where have been challenging and you got through them, use those to just like use the scab analogy to be like, hey, do I really want to undo the healing that I have? Because you're in the middle of healing, and then when you decide to go back to that behavior, text that ex, respond to the inbox or whatever that looks like, you're picking the scab and you're slowing the process. And that analogy really helped me to not do that, because I was like, it doesn't have to take a long time. I don't do it. And I'll stall my process. So that was a visual and kind of what I was telling myself to get through it. And I believe that it's like, if you're trying to get through something, just get through it. Don't piss around if you can help it, and call your pillar, do whatever you need to do instead of whatever it is. And then it's quicker.
But if you do pick the scab, don't beat the fuck out of yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes the path of change is really hard, and we're going to get hooked back in, and we're going to succumb to that desire again. And every now and then we may succumb, but don't let that like be the rationalization to succumb to it either.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's a balance here, and we got to learn through the accepting that we may fuck up here and there. That's where we start building that little bit of self-love, right? And step 6 is primarily really hard for the first few years of the program because we haven't grooved it in. So it kind of correlates with my theory that self-love doesn't really come till down the road either. Because as you learn how to navigate step 6, you're actually learning how to build some compassion for yourself in forgiveness, and maybe when you do fuck up, and the people around you help navigate you in a good way so that you're not beating yourself up either. So year 3 and 4 and 5, that self-love really becomes something real, right? Anyway, so the key words entirely ready underline the fact that we want to aim at the very best we can know or learn. That's important. Underlying the fact that we want to aim at the very best we can know or learn. That's it. Okay. How many of us have this degree of willingness or readiness? In absolute sense, practically nobody has it. It's the best we can do with all the honesty that we can summon, is to try to have it. Even the best of us will discover that to our dismay, there is always a sticking point, a point at which we say, no, I can't give this defect up yet. No, I don't want to stop swiping right on Tinder. No, I don't want to stop getting into relationships. No, I don't want to stop having sex with random women. I don't want to stop standing up for myself and pride. I don't want to stop indulging in porn or whatever it might be for you. I don't want to stop catering to this person's insecurity because they need my help, right? Whatever it might be. And the subtle ones are pretty sneaky too. At points which we say, no, I can't give this up yet. And we shall often tread on even more dangerous ground when we cry, this I will never give up. Such is the power of our instincts to overreach themselves. So as the instincts are the root and the primary cause of the defects, the instincts will overreach themselves and actually cause us pain unbeknownst to us sometimes, and powerfully and blindly and subtly, these things will drive us. They may dominate us, and they still might insist upon ruling our lives, but we can keep working at it. That's the whole point of step 6. And another point of step 6 is humility in the humiliation and the pain. Step 6 is about humiliation and pain. That's step 6. And then step 7 is about a desire to seek and do God's will. But while you're working with step 6, you can have that desire to seek and do God's will. But the step 6 defects are really hard to relinquish. So there's kind of a balance in that also.
Well, and what you would say to me is like, just do what you think you got to do, pray about it, do it, stay sober, collect the data, and then you recalibrate, and then you do the next thing. You know, you just keep going, and you keep being sober, and you keep doing what you think you got to do with God and your pillars, and you keep going, and then you keep collecting the data. And that made me think of my grandma always telling me, you know, all things work together for good to those who love God. And she'd always tell me that when things would go like kind of sideways a little bit, and it's like, God can make all things good. Like he can use anything. And I believe that. And I see that, especially in the rooms, like you hear crazy stories about how things turned around, and the stories don't stop in that area. And so I just felt like, okay, well, you do what you got to do, and then God's got me. And so you do it, and you stay sober, and then you see what's up, and then you do the next thing. And it goes like that.
And no matter how far we have progressed, desires will always be found which oppose the grace of God. So you can do really well on certain defects and come a bit of a way down the yardstick. But then you may find a desire that's opposing the grace of God, and it fucking snags you back. But that's okay. That doesn't mean we stop. And it doesn't mean we throw in the towel. It means we recalibrate, like Janine just said. We get regrounded, and we keep moving forward with God's help, always with God's help. Some who feel they have done well may dispute this. So let's try to think through a little further. Practically everybody wishes to be rid of his most glaring and destructive handicaps. No one wants to be so proud he is scorned a braggart, nor so greedy he is labeled a thief. No one wants to be angry enough to murder, lustful enough to rape, glutton enough to ruin his health. No one wants to be agonized by the chronic pain of envy or be paralyzed by sloth. Of course, most human beings don't suffer these defects at these rock bottom levels. We who have escaped these extremes are apt to congratulate ourselves. Yet can we? This is a really important paragraph. After all, hasn't been self-interest pure and simple that has enabled most of us to escape? Not much spiritual effort is involved in avoiding excesses which will bring us punishment anyway. But when we face up to the less violent aspects of these very same defects, then where do we stand? So what it's saying is, just because you stopped fighting, you don't pat yourself on the back and say, good job, right? There's not a lot of spiritual value based in just not fighting. You're more doing it because you don't want to go to jail, right? If you're a rapist and you stop raping and you give yourself a pat on the back and say, yeah, I'm fucking growing spiritually. No, that's not the fucking deal here, right? That's not it, because you don't want to go to jail. So like, we got to look at, are we relinquishing this based on the self-interest that I'm not going to get punished for it anymore? Like speeding, for example. Stop speeding is a great way to start the process, but the stop speeding and do the speed limit is like, that's where it should be. That is the fucking law. Now, you know, how can we do this? Driving and not like giving the finger. So you're not going to get penalized by giving someone the finger, but now stopping and going, okay, God, I'm acting in this way. I don't want to act in that way. Can you show me a better way? And maybe think that this person might be having a bad day. Now we're talking about something that's more subtle. Okay.
When I was reading this paragraph, I was thinking about, so it's like, I've escaped the extremes of, you know, murdering and lust and the gluttony and those things. I've escaped those, but it's like saying to me, have I escaped those? Not just because I want a good reputation. Like my selfish interest there is that I don't want to be known as a murderer. I also don't want to be known as somebody who steals and robs from banks. And so the extremes on those ends, my own invested interest of my reputation and how people view me and the kind of regard I want to have, that's prevented me. So I can't really congratulate myself for that. But then it's saying to me on the sloth part, paralyzed by sloth, on the less violent aspect of that. So no, I'm not sitting at home playing video games all day long, unemployed and, you know, mooching off my parents. I'm not doing that on that one end, but I also have areas of my life that I know that I need more discipline that actually really piss me off when I fail to do so. So it's like, I can't hold the bar to the extreme of the extreme. I need to hold the bar to myself and to my own defects that are getting in my own way. And, you know, the idea of, you know, to better make sure your own shit is clean before you start pointing out it in other people. It's like the comparison game to me is a no-win. And I have to be looking to the ideal of God and God's will and only comparing, you know, my own defects and how they play out in my life today.
10-4. So we're getting to the spot in the step 6 where, you know, when I was 18 months or 2 years sober, this is the game changer shit for me. When I was standing at the turning point and I didn't know what to do anymore, and I was hanging with my bro Jesse, and we knew that the solution lied within the literature. We knew that we were acting in defect, but we didn't know much about it. I don't remember hearing a lot about defective character when I was in the program or step 6 in general, but this is the turning point that actually was my life right here, where it says on that first page of step 6 that this is the greatest fact of his life. This is where it began right here for me in step 6. Who, for example, doesn't like to feel just a little superior to the next fellow or even quite a lot superior? I stopped right there and I was like, holy shit. I do like to feel a little superior to my fellow, or how about a lot superior? And then I looked at it in like my work life. Then I looked at it in like my brother and my relationship, just with my brother in my family, or in family gatherings, or at school, or with my friends, or at the pool table, or wherever. I started looking at where I like to be a little superior to my fellows in all aspects of my life. And Jesse and I, we talked about it, which is why it's really good to read this literature with somebody else who really wants to grow and learn, so that you can both play off each other. And I realized, holy shit, I'm really that. That's me. And I looked at it back when I was a kid playing hockey, when I was on the schoolyard, fucking fighting, playing football, playing soccer. And I could see how that manifested itself all through my life, right to the point when I read that day. So then what it did is it gave me awareness of what I was thinking, what I was feeling. As I left that day in the truck with Jesse, I would go wherever, and that was now in my mind. And I'd be like, holy fuck, I'm trying to be superior right here, right now. I want to sound better. I want to look better. I want to whatever better. And then I was able to bring God in those moments and try to actually relinquish it. And at the start, I didn't really know what I was doing. But over time, as I was entirely honest and willing, I tried to do this repeatedly on all these faults without reservation. And I wouldn't say that I did it without reservation on all my faults repeatedly when I started, but I at least had a desire to change and try it. And then eventually it kind of started taking for me. So isn't it true that we like to let greed masquerade as ambition? Think about that one, right? There's a lot of men out there that are really greedy women too. And letting it masquerade, meaning fucking the actor behind ambition. It looks like ambition. I'm going to rationalize and chalk it up to it looks like I'm ambitious. But really, I'm fucking greedy. And why do I want this? And looking at it, right? And it'll all this stuff that I'm talking about take you down to the root. It'll take you down to the root of that third column. Like, and some of the stuff out of my superiority, it was because I had a bad self-worth image. Part of that had to do with me being Indigenous. Part of it had to be with my dad not being around. Part of it had to do with my mom being fucking poor and being a waitress. And like, there's all these interconnected pieces in the roots that allowed this thing to kind of surface in my life and be one of my primary coping mechanisms. And overcompensation really is what it was. To think of liking lust seems impossible. But how many men and women speak love with their lips and believe what they say that so that they can hide lust in the dark corner of their minds? And even while staying within conventional bounds, many people have to admit that their imaginary sex excursions are apt to be all dressed up as dreams of romance. What does that even mean? It means how many men and women speak love with their lips, or they portray this idea of what they want. Okay, so I'm just going to use an example of myself. Okay, well, I'm going to say that I want like a very conservative, like sweet wife that hasn't been promiscuous and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, we're going to get married. We're going to live this pure little life, and we're going to find this house and live in this white picket fence and live this like imaginary dream. And then, but in reality, I'm hiding lust in the dark corner of my mind. I really do want that, but I want a little slut that's gonna fucking do what I want her to do in the bed because I'm selfish, and I hope that she's like that because that's what I need in my life. But I would never say that, because who says that? Well, when I sponsor now, we talk about this stuff. I'm gonna say to the guy or the chick, I'm like, okay, what do you want? Like, are you like this and this and this and this in your intimate relations with your partner in bed? What do you like? What do you don't like? Well, they got to be honest and vulnerable with me, because if I get in a relationship with actually a conservative woman who is all those things that my lips just said, and I actually am hiding lust in the dark corner of my mind, and that's what I want, I'm never gonna this relationship is gonna fail, because I'm not actually being honest and vulnerable with who I am in that area. And this is important shit to talk about, because so many men will get in relationships with, or women, with people who are way too conservative, and they're fucking a little crazy, but then they have to like now sell out themselves for this relationship that they got into on a lie. So for me in my relationships, this stuff's all talked about within the first 6 months, and maybe we're not compatible in these areas. And even while staying within conventional bounds, bullshitting myself, how many people have to admit that their imaginary sex excursions are apt to be dressed up in dreams of romance? So now this guy's not getting what he needs at home in these like more sinister sexual type displays within, which are totally fine, by the way. If that's what the partners are both into, fuck, that's fine. But you get into that with somebody who's not like that, and now you're fucking going to the rub and tugs, you're going to the porn, you're going to the hookers, now you're like selling out your soul, and now you're dishonoring somebody else. Like, these things happen in real life, so they actually need to be talked about in real life through what we do as sponsors and pillars in this program. Anything?
Oh, just all the reasons why I don't date. No, I don't have anything.
Okay. And like, I'm just going to touch on this a little more, because sex conduct never gets the attention that it should in step 5, because so many people are afraid to talk about sex conduct. It has to be an area where you step out into vulnerability as the sponsee and as the sponsor, because it's the sex relation and emotional security and companionship. It almost all is tied together within what I'm talking about. And as you normalize this and you're able to talk about it, it makes life so much fucking easier. And then you allow to build compassion and vulnerability with the people that you're working with. And like I've said before, like I have sponsees that I work with that, you know, they're totally forward with me in their sex relation conduct and what they're doing behind closed doors. And I don't want to know what they're doing all the time in their sex life, but you know, if they've had a problem with porn or sex addiction or, you know, whatever, they just come to me and they just talk to me about it normally. I don't have a judgment. I know that we all suffer from our own spiritual diseases, and that's a big part of it. So I really implore people to really explore that part and look at your own life, talk to your sponsees, talk to your sponsor about it, and hopefully you have somebody that you can really engage with that's not shying away from it, or that it's at least willing to help pray with you and become willing to be honest and willing to look at these things, because these things actually drive so much of our lives.
I think, like I will add that if the book says we all have sex problems, and if it is something that is a major big problem, and even if it's not because it's so relevant within a relationship, talking about it does so many things that I think you need in the process. Like, it brings some clarity, it brings, if there's some shame that goes around it, it brings that up, and then you get somebody there who has eyes on it, so that if things come up, they can remind you or mirror back, or to guide you effectively, because if they don't know the kinds of things that go on, it can be harder to lead in the right way. Like Bill's example, where if he doesn't talk about, the type of person that he's looking for, the type of pattern that happens, or, then he could get into a relationship and make concession for what he doesn't want because of a woman who meets a more of a sexual ideal versus what he wants in the long run. And a sexual ideal doesn't stand the test of time, and you want to be directing yourself towards a partner that is compatible through the lifespan, not for your instant gratification in a moment. And so you want to have a person who's able to share those thoughts and hash things out, and to guide you back to what your initial ideal was in the first place. And if you don't share that, and if you don't admit that to pen and paper, just right there, you're leaving a lot to the psyche, and within the psyche is a lot of static. And the pen to paper pulls the static and it puts it down in a way that you can start to contend with it. And so the pen to paper is the first step, so that you're able to be free of it, so it's not powerfully blinding you and driving you. So pen to paper will get it out there, and that's the first step. But to bring someone else in, because we can justify and rationalize and be led powerfully and blindly. So you want to have somebody who can fight and contend on these dark parts about yourself. And the sex ideals, because it is so relevant and it is such a strong pull. So
Okay. So why don't we just read the rest of this? And if there's anything you want to talk about, so we'll just read right to the end, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Where are we at? Self-righteous?
Yeah.
Self-righteous anger can be very enjoyable. In a perverse way, we can actually take satisfaction from the fact that many people annoy us, for it brings a comfortable feeling of superiority. Gossip barbed with our anger, a polite form of murder by character assassination, has its satisfactions for us too. Here we are not trying to help those we criticize, we are trying to proclaim our own righteousness. When gluttony is less than ruinous, we have a milder word for that too. We call it taking our comfort. We live in a world riddled with envy. To a greater or less degree, everybody is infected with it. From this defect, we must surely get a warped yet definite satisfaction. Else, why would we consume a great amount of time wishing for what we have not, rather than working for it, or angrily looking for attributes we shall never have, instead of adjusting to the fact and accepting it? And how often we work hard with no better motive than to be secure and slothful later on, and we call that retiring. Consider too our talents for procrastination, which is really sloth in 5 syllables. Nearly anyone could submit a good list of those defects such as these, and few of us would seriously think of giving them up, at least until they cause us excessive misery. Some people, of course, may conclude that they are indeed ready to have all such defects taken from them. But even these people, if they construct a list of still milder defects, will be obliged to admit that they prefer to hang on to some of them. Therefore, it seems plain that few of us can quickly or easily become ready to aim at spiritual and moral perfection. We want to settle only for as much perfection as will get us by in life, according, of course, to our own various and sundry ideas of what will get us by. So the difference between the boys and the men is the difference between striving for a self-determined objective and for the perfect objective, which is of God. Many will ask, how can we accept the entire implication of step 6? Why, that is perfection. This sounds like a hard question, but practically speaking, it isn't. Only step 1, where we made 100% admission that we were powerless over alcohol, can be practiced with absolute perfection. The remaining 11 steps state perfect ideals. They are goals toward which we look and the measuring sticks by which we estimate our progress. In this light, step 6 is still difficult, but not at all impossible. The only urgent thing is that we make a beginning and keep trying. If we would gain any real advantage in the use of this step on problems other than alcohol, we shall need to make a brand new venture into open-mindedness. We shall need to raise our eyes toward perfection and to be ready to walk in that direction. It will seldom matter how haltingly we walk. The only question will be, are we ready?
Looking again at those defects we are unwilling to give up, we ought to erase the hard and fast lines that we have drawn. Perhaps we shall be obliged in some cases to still say, this I cannot give up yet. But we should not say to ourselves, this I will never give up. Let's dispose of what appears to be a hazardous open end we have left. It is suggested that we ought to become entirely willing to aim toward perfection. We note that some delay, of course, might be pardoned. That word, in mind of rationalizing alcoholic, could certainly be given a long-term meaning. He could say, how very easy, sure, I'll head towards perfection, but I certainly am not going to hurry any. Maybe I can postpone dealing with some of these problems indefinitely. Of course, this won't do. Such a bluffing of oneself will have to go the way of many other pleasant rationalization. At the very least, we shall have to come to grips with some of our worst character defects and take action toward their removal as quickly as we can. The moment we say no, never, and minds close against the grace of God. Delay is dangerous and rebellion may be fatal. This is the exact point at which we can abandon limited objectives and move towards God's will for us.
Perfect. Okay. So back to self-righteous anger. This is the last actually example. Well, there's a few more examples in the next paragraph, but specific example. Self-righteous anger can also be very enjoyable. And think about in our own lives how we get a little bit of enjoyment out of that self-righteous anger. It has the component of spiritual superiority or just superiority in it. And we enjoy that, right? In a perverse way, we can actually take satisfaction that many people annoy us. And that's really cool. Think about when people annoy you or you see people and then you're talking about it with somebody else and it's like, we kind of feel superior to the person that we're talking about and they're fucking annoying, right? For it brings a comfortable feeling of superiority. Gossip barbed with our anger. I love this. Gossip barbed with our anger, a polite form of murder by character assassination. It has its satisfactions for us too. That really lights up what gossip actually is, okay?
Yes.
It's barbed with our anger, and we may say it in a way that it's not like full anger, but when you like peel back the layers of the intention of what you're saying, you'll see the selfish motives all over it, and there are little barbs of anger underneath of that. And it is murder, a polite form of murder by character assassination. Trying to maybe influence people on maybe somebody else, right?
I think a lot of people have, like I've heard a lot of people in their hesitation about AA comes from a bad experience about like somebody talked about this or that, or talking to a sponsor about whatever's going on, not sponsored, and all this shit, right? And so, and I get that that's happening. I also think that as you work this program, it doesn't matter what people say and you'll start to lose your fear of people. But where it comes into my life today is like, there's times when I actually do feel self-justified anger. And I know that the problem is me, but I need to talk it out with the pillar. And so like, I need to choose pillars that A, aren't going to think I'm just gossiping. B, that I think it'll stay between us, and C, that can put me back to like where my part is and keep me on track with that. Because when I bring up I'm angry at someone, I have a few people that I will talk about it with who, and I kind of like fall on the line of like, I try to get through it myself because I don't like to involve other people because it can feel like I'm about to gossip, but that's a myth. You choose that you have your little small group of people that you can process your anger. And those people know that that's all you're doing. And that anger is fleeting. You process it, you look at your part, you take action where action's needed, and you move on. And it's not about your calling to gossip and to bitch and complain. Like when I'm angry, I need to see my part, and sometimes I can't see it, so I need to talk about it. And there's a huge difference between making a step 10 call around that to see my own self versus me calling to bitch and complain about somebody who's not doing something. Because when I'm bitching and complaining about, like Bill say, I know that it's me. And like, if I'm going on and on about Bill, I need somebody to let me rant and then bring it back to me and what action I need to take. And a lot of times when, if I'm angry, it's a deeper thing and it's projecting out whatever. And so I need to choose somebody who's going to be able to catch all of this in a way that, and the only people that can do that in that way is 12-step people who are doing this themselves. And then it's not gossip. So I just wanted to clarify the difference between like, because step 10s, I hear this, like then I'm gossiping, and then I'm gossiping. If you do it, like if I take a step 10 call, I get off the phone and I forget. Like it's like emotions are so temporary, and when emotions go unbalanced, we step 10. It says in step 10, do we have emotional imbalance? When we don't, we look at us, and we need to call somebody and have that process. So there's a huge difference between gossiping for the sake of gossiping and talking about your emotional experience and getting the feedback and taking the proper action.
100%. I'm just going to background that. I get a lot of calls, or I talk to a lot of people, and they're like, well, this is gossiping. And I'm like, no, it's fucking, we're looking at a situation that we need to talk about, and we're observing. Are you judging that person? Well, no. Well, neither am I. But we have to collect data. We have to collect the facts, and here's the facts. So there's a fine line between the gossiping and the fucking not gossiping. And it comes, again, the humility within that conversation comes within the two beholders of the conversation. One may be gossiping and the other may not be, right? One's intention may be to hurt the person they're talking about, and the other one isn't.
Is to do a step 10 the proper way, and
Right.
then to take action where action is due in their own realm, in their own program. Yeah.
So be mindful of that when you're talking about a situation. And oftentimes I want to know who the person is that, okay, you're talking about this, and that. Okay, who is it? Well, I don't really want to say. Well, fuck, I need you to say. Why? Because I need to give you the proper data. And part of data and looking at step 6 is observing other people as well. And not like being superior, but looking at what other people are doing and saying. So for example, there's this one gentleman who I know in the program, and when I sponsor people, I say, you're going to run into this guy, and he's been around for a while. And when you interact with him, I want you to be mindful and watch. You're going to talk about something in your life, and then he's going to steal the conversation. Then he's going to talk about his own life, and he won't stop talking about his own life. And then you're going to try to bring something up about your life, and he's going to fucking walk away because he doesn't want to hear anything you got to say about your life, because it's all about him. And I want you to be mindful. And it's called be the watcher. You're the watcher. So then my sponsee goes into life and then comes back. He's like, oh, I ran into that guy. I said, what happened? He's like, oh, we started talking. He started telling me all about his life. And then I mentioned something about mine, and he fucked up. I'm like, see, that's what we don't do. And no judgment to the guy. He just hasn't learned yet. And that's totally fine. But at least it brings awareness to the guy that I'm working with to not do that kind of thing, right? And he saw how actually, like, how that wasn't a good way to try to communicate. He's not a worker among work. He's not being a person among people. He's still very selfish. Fine. Okay. Anyway, so that next paragraph, I'm not going to talk about it. You can read it yourself. But on page 68, it talks about, therefore, it seems plain that few of us can quickly or easily become ready to aim at spiritual or moral perfection. We only want to settle for as much perfection will get us by in life. And that we got to be careful on. Because once you start settling and resting on your laurels, you are heading for trouble. For alcohol is a subtle foe. Okay? And when we talk about resting on our laurels, we're talking about being self-satisfied. So a lot of people come here and they get a lot of good things, and then they become satisfied with their life. And when you start becoming self-satisfied, you start becoming complacent. Once you start becoming complacent, God can slowly turn into more of a theory again. And then before you know it, you're running your life with the best of intention, and then you're fucking 8 months, 12 months, a year or two down the road, you're struggling hard. Because God was only a theory, and you've been just doing things for you. And so you only settled for as much perfection that will get you by in life. You didn't raise your eyes to perfection, okay? According, of course, to the various and sundry ideas of what will get us by. So the difference between the boys and the men, here it is the difference between striving for a self-determined objective or for the perfect objective, which is God. And I always say the perfect objective is love. And when you think about love, love is actually perfection. So in a sense, I don't believe even Bill is right trying to label perfection as like being perfect, like in the sense that we understand perfection in our society. I actually think he's meaning raising our eyes to perfection, which is love. Love and tolerance of others is our code. The whole goal of this program is to be loving to everybody and ourselves. And when you dump all the principles that each step has and it funnels through, and what's the result? It's all based in love. So that's what we're trying to raise our eyes to perfection to. And if God is love, then love is kind of the goal here.
That paragraph, I just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of sponsees that I have that I would say that the big defects that they contend with is settling, and right here is good enough, and like it's just like not believing that it gets better, and not wanting to take the steps into the unknown where it gets better, and just saying this is way better than it was. And the settling for crumbs of what recovery could be, and to not stop there. And you don't know what God has in store for you. So like, it's not just a paragraph written to people who are trying to run their own show. It's also to say, you know, like, you don't know what your ideals are, and they're not as low as you make them. I'll tell you that.
Okay, middle paragraph, bottom of the paragraph. Step 6 is still difficult, but not at all impossible. The only urgent thing is that we make a beginning and keep trying. So you make the beginning and you don't stop, you keep trying. And whatever mistakes you're making, you're not making mistakes anymore. You're making a decision that you learn and you grow from, and you do this with the best possible attitude, and you always move forward. So the word mistakes is kind of like in the back, it's in the background now. It's not even a word that we relate with, okay? So if we would gain any real advantage in the use of step 6 on problems other than alcohol, which is what we're talking about, we shall need to make a brand new venture into open-mindedness. We shall need to raise our eyes towards perfection and be ready to walk in that direction. It will seldom matter how haltingly we walk. The only question will be, are we ready? That's it, moving forward. So perhaps we shall, not top of the next page, perhaps we shall be obliged in some cases to say, this I cannot give up yet. But we should not say to ourselves, this I will never give up. So my belief in this program that we work is we never draw hard and fast lines. You never say yes for sure and never say no, never. Because you set yourself up for expectations that you may not hit. And then you create shame, and then you create people giving you more shame. So you just, the best possible attitude, okay? Never say never and never say for sure in anything. One of the examples I like to use is never say, like, people don't like me for this one. Oh, you're my best friend, best friends forever. Best friends forever. You know, I'm never gonna do this, I'm never gonna do that. Don't ever say that shit. Just be like, you're like one of my all-time life's most best relationships, I love you, whatever you want to say, but like, keep the fucking hard and fast lines out of everything you do. Okay, you'll see down the road why. So kind of working down the paragraph, at very least we shall have to come to grips with some of the worst character defects and take action towards the removal as quickly as we can. The moment we say no, never, our mind closes against the grace of God. So when I say, no, I'm not working on something, never am I going to work on that, our minds close against the grace of God. And because the defects are life and death for us, if we don't get rid of the most dangerous ones, we may drink over it, because we drink over these defects because they are manifestations of self. They are the manifestations of the spiritual malady. Delay is dangerous. Okay, we could cause a lot more pain and harm, and it's dangerous. And rebellion, full out rebellion, may be fatal. And that's true, because I've seen guys that said, I'm not working on this sex conduct thing, and they're fucking dead now. Rebellion was fatal. And it could be money, it could be status, it could be many different things, relationships. Not working on certain things, you can die over it, because you will eventually pick up. This is the exact point which we abandon limited objectives and move towards God's will for us.
Which we decided in step 3, we were going to be less of the actor and let God run the show. So to draw those hard and fast lines is taking that will back anyways.
100%, because we don't know what's good or bad.